Oh, it's a great pleasure for me talking to you.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah,
First
sure.
of all, I'm delighted to be here. It's not my first visit to Ankara, but it's one that I always look forward to. Second, I'm not the only father of the internet. There are a lot of them. You know that old expression that success has 1,000 fathers and failure is an orphan. In fact, Bob Kahn and I did the original design 40 years ago. And the internet was actually turned on operationally on January 1st, 1983. So we celebrated the 30th anniversary of the internet this year. So just to set the record straight, there are a lot of people to thank for making the internet what it is today.
Okay, so let's say one of the fathers.
One of the fathers of the internet, but not the only one.
You have an interesting title, which is Chief Internet Evangelist and VP of Google. Can you tell us your story at Google?
So this is actually amusing. When I was invited to join Google in 2005, they said to me, "What title would you like?" And I said to them, "How about Archduke?" And because it sounded like a pretty good title. And they went away for a while and came back and said, "You know, the previous Archduke was Ferdinand, and he was assassinated in 1914, and it started World War I. Maybe that's not a good title to have." And then they said, "Why don't you be our chief internet evangelist?" And I thought, okay, I can do that, because my role for the last 40 years has been to try to get more internet built all around the world. And I was so glad to hear the remarks this morning about investment in infrastructure here in Turkey to enable more internet access in the country.
I mean, you are one of the fathers of internet. Did you anticipate on what the internet would become to in these days, and what's next? Have you ever think about this scenario?
Well, we think about this all the time. Everyone wants to know, did you have any idea what was going to happen when you did this work 40 years ago? And of course, the easy answer would be to say no. But that wouldn't be wrong. It turns out that we had the benefit, Bob Kahn and I, of having participated in a previous experiment called ARPANET, which stood for Advanced Research Projects Agency Network, which was funded by the U.S. Defense Department, that was interested in the possibility of using computers for resource sharing. And it was an extremely successful experiment. It mostly involved research institutions around the United States. And they were doing research in artificial intelligence and computer applications. They, every year they kept asking for the latest computing equipment, and even ARPA couldn't afford to do that. But what happened is that we built this network, and they were able to share each other's software and computing capability. But more important, there were several inventions that took place during that period which informed my thinking and Bob Kahn's thinking about what the internet could do. Electronic mail was invented in 1971. A man named Douglas Engelbart invented a system that, for all practical purposes, was like the World Wide Web in one computer. It was called the online system. He invented the mouse so that you could point to things on the screen and tell the computer what you wanted to do with the text that was on the screen. He also invented hyperlinking so that you could click on a link and go to another document that was also in the same computer. The Xerox Palo Alto Research Center was 1.5 miles away from my laboratory at Stanford University. They were inventing the Ethernet in 1973, the same year that Bob and I began work on the internet design. They had the Alto personal computer in 1973. It was a $50,000 box in those years, but everyone at the facility had one connected on this local area network. They had lots of applications that were what you see is what you get kinds of things, just like you see today on your laptops and tablets. They were living 20 years in the future. So Bob and I saw all of that. And we thought about the design of a system that would allow an arbitrarily large number of networks to be interconnected and look like one big system. And so we had a very clear sense of the power that could come out of that everyone in the world someday would have access to all of the contents of the system. So we were strongly motivated at the time. Although we didn't imagine everything that happened, there's one other interesting little fact. In 1973, the handheld mobile was invented by Marty Cooper. And I didn't know anything about that until 10 years later, in 1983, when he actually released the operational handheld mobile and put it into operation the same year that we turned the internet on. And I was invited to come to lunch in 1983 with a friend of mine who said, I have something to show you. And I sat down at the lunch table, and he had this thing sitting on the table. It was about this big. It weighed about 3.5 pounds, and it had a battery that lasted for 20 minutes. But Marty said that it was okay. It was so heavy you couldn't hold it for more than 20 minutes anyway. So I said, what is that? And he said, it's a handheld mobile phone. And I started asking him questions. Well, how does it work? And eventually he said, well, I don't know all the answers. Why don't you call the guy that invented it? So in 1983, I called Marty Cooper, and I heard from him how he designed and built this thing. So the mobile phone and the internet were largely invented and turned on at the same time, but they didn't meet until almost 20 years later. And now we see what happens when you take a smartphone and the internet and you allow them to work together. They are mutually self-supporting and reinforcing. You have access to the internet no matter where you are, and the mobile phone itself uses the internet's capability, processing power and information, to deliver services to users. So it's a marriage of very powerful technologies. So I'm sorry, it's such a long answer to a simple question.
No, I really enjoy when you tell us all about that. So what is next, do you think?
Well, you can see what's going on now. First of all, more broadband, more investment in fiber to link the mobile stations together, to link major computer systems and data centers together. We are starting to enter into a period we call the Internet of Things. These are appliances that have internet capability. It could be ordinary appliances around the house, refrigerators, stoves, ovens, microwaves, and so on, or entertainment equipment, DVDs, Blu-ray players, projection television sets like this thing up here. All of those devices, plus the ones in the office, plus the ones in the car, plus the ones we carry around on our persons or in our purses or in our pockets, all of them will be part of the internet environment. What's important about this is to recognize that when you create standards that allow these devices to interact with each other, you create opportunities for new businesses. So I'll give you a small example. Suppose that, like me, you probably have a number of boxes at home that serve your entertainment. You have a Blu-ray player or a DVD player. You might have a video recorder. You have a big television set, flat screen,
Game console.
and you have a little pile of infrared controllers on the front of the table here. And when you sit down to be entertained, you fumble trying to figure out which is the right remote to control a particular box. And then when you finally figure out which one it is, it has a dead battery. So my theory is that we should get rid of all those. Every one of those boxes should be part of the local network in the house. And with standard interfaces, we could actually have a business say to you, would you like me to manage your entertainment for you? All you have to do is go to a website and click on the movies you want to see and the music you want to listen to, and I will take care of putting the copies wherever they have to be. So the standards allow this third-party company to serve your needs because of the standard interfaces to the Internet of Things. we will see lots and lots of opportunities like that. So that's one big path of going forward. The second thing is what I'm wearing, Google Glass. The reason this is important is that it gives an opportunity for the computing world to participate in the world I live in. So this computer sees what I see, and it hears what I hear. And it's capable of drawing on all the resources of the internet to help me interpret what it is that I am experiencing. So it becomes a partner in the context of my life. So if I'm looking at something, maybe this is a bottle of wine, and I can point to it and say, are the tasting notes for this wine? The system sees the label, looks up the label on the internet, tracks down the tasting notes from the Cellar Tracker application, and then either says in my ear or displays on the little image display here what the tasting notes are. So I've now got a partner. It's not just a tool, because it's something that's participating in my context. So I'm very excited about that direction that we're heading in. Another thing which is happening is the ability to interface computing equipment to our neural systems. The most trivial example, well, I shouldn't say trivial, the most obvious and immediate example of this is called the cochlear implant. My wife has two of them. She was deaf for 50 years. She lost her hearing when she was 3 years old. And she had to read people's lips for half a century. And then in 1996, she learned about a device called a cochlear implant. It's actually electronics that are put inside of your head that includes electrodes that go inside the cochlea. This is where the auditory nerve is, all curled up like a little snail shell. So they put the electrodes inside there. They have electronics that are buried inside your head. And then she has a thing called a speech processor, which is about the size of a mobile. And that is connected magnetically to the side of her head. And signals go back and forth into the speech, from the speech processor into the cochlear implant. I feel sorry for the translator who is trying to work through all of these terms. I hope it's making sense. So the way this works is that the computer hears the sound and figures out which frequencies are coming in, and then it figures out which of the electrodes that are touching the auditory nerve should be electrically stimulated. And that is what makes the brain think it can still hear, because it's getting the same electrical pulses that your ear would normally make, except it's doing it artificially using a computer. So, of course, this had a big dramatic effect on my wife. When she came home, I couldn't get her off the telephone. She was a 50-year-old teenager. And she would take any calls from the marketing companies, hello, would you like to buy this? Oh, where are you? Oh, you're in India. Oh, that's interesting. Which part of India are you in? And she would chat for half an hour. I felt kind of sorry for the marketing people who said, are you going to buy this? Well, no, but thanks for calling. Then she went to the library and she called them up and said, I would like to get recorded books for the blind, because she wanted to listen to words that she had not heard before. So they said, fine, what's your name and your address and your phone number? And then they said, now you're blind, aren't you? And she said, no, I'm deaf. And there was this long pause, and they're trying to figure out, well, how is that going to work? So she now listens to 500 books on tape. She has patch cords. So when she gets on the airplane to watch a movie, she attaches the speech processor to the little jack in the armrest. The only sound she can hear is coming from the movie and not the screaming kid that's 2 seats over here. So this has been such a life-changing experience for her that we had to buy a bigger house, because now she could have big parties because she could hear. So this is just one example, though. What's happening now with the neural technology is that ocular implants, things that can restore sight, and spinal implants that could restore the use of limbs that have been lost because of spinal injury, are absolutely going to come in the future. So that's also another big path, neural interconnections to computers. And then the last thing I will mention is that the internet is going off the planet. In fact, it's already off the planet. 15 years ago, my colleagues at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and I began a project to design and build an interplanetary internet to support both manned and robotic space exploration. And this, we've gone through several iterations of the design. We now have the system operating on planet Earth, in the International Space Station, on Mars, both on the surface and in orbiters around Mars, and also in a spacecraft that's in orbit around the Sun called Epoxy. So that process is now well underway. The protocols for space communication are a little different from TCP/IP for a number of good technical reasons, but they are well enough established now that we are standardizing them through the Consultative Committee on Space Data Systems, which is part of the international UN community. So all the spacefaring nations have an opportunity to be compatible in the same way that when you plug into the internet, you can talk to several billion devices because of the standards. So that's my little picture of what's going on in the future.
So we can definitely expect more improvements and new technology in fields like health and especially in the hardware, I guess.
Oh, we didn't even you're right. Thank you for reminding me. Now there's also monitoring of vital signs, keeping track of pulse rate and temperature and maybe even blood sugar levels and pulse levels, how much oxygen is in your blood. But that continuous monitoring means that we may be able to detect a problem before it becomes a big problem. And so the idea that we have monitoring of our health is also an important part of the future. So thank you for reminding me of that.
And so, internet created miracles, but it's not a complete, perfect world.
No, it's not.
So, in your opinion, what are the pros and cons?
Well, the big problem with the internet is people. It's us. If there weren't any people, we wouldn't have problems. The problem with people is that not everybody has your best interest at heart. And we anticipated that this would happen. Around 1988, I began to think about how could we deliver internet to the general public, because up until that time, it was only available to the research community and the Defense Department. And so as I pursued this goal, my friends in the internet research world said, that's terrible. Why would you do that? You let all these random people into our playbox, our sandbox. And I said, but it's going to be useful for them, so we should do that. The side effect of letting the general public use the internet is that some people don't have everyone's best interest at heart, and they are interested in committing fraud. They're interested in abusing people. They're harassing, they're sending spam. There's a wide range of bad behaviors that show up in the internet, and it's all because it's us. It's human nature. So we have to do something about that. And there are a number of things that we can do. Some of them are purely technical. For example, using very, very strong authentication methods to keep people from sneaking into your email or your other accounts. So at Google, we make available hardware devices that generate cryptographically random passwords that you only use one time. If anyone sees you using them, it doesn't do them any good because you can only use it once. So that's an example. We're using cryptography in order to help protect people's privacy. We are teaching people how to avoid trouble by not clicking on email or not clicking on websites that might lead you to a dangerous target. So there's 3 different ways we can deal with these problems. The first one is technical. We try to warn people away from websites that might have malware on them, viruses, worms, and Trojan horses, or provide cryptography or strong authentication. So there are technical ways of trying to prevent the bad thing from happening. The second thing that you can do, I will call post hoc enforcement. If something bad does happen, and if you can figure out who did it, then you can say there will be consequences. And so we can adopt a practice that says if we catch you doing something that we collectively think is wrong, or maybe the law says is wrong, then we provide the law with tools to track down people who are causing those problems. Now, this is made more complicated in the internet environment because it's completely global in scope. And so the perpetrator might be in one jurisdiction and maybe one country, and the victim might be in another, and we have to cope with that by cooperation among the countries to deal with these problems. But there's a third way of dealing with this problem, and it sounds a little weak. It's simply moral suasion. We just tell people, don't do that because it's wrong. Now that sounds weak, but it's like gravity. When enough people agree not to do certain things, it's a very powerful force. And so we have social tools in our hands that can help encourage people to do the right thing and not the wrong thing. So all three of those tools are needed in order to cope with the parts of the internet that are not so constructive.
So I'm going to get back to the innovation topic,
Okay.
If you don't mind. So we've been talking about innovation in the panel right before this one. And we talked about many things and the things that may be done by the governments as well. So I want to get your opinion, definitely. What are solutions to overcome the barriers and continue the velocity on innovation? And also, what needs to be done by governments?
Okay, so first of all, there's a wonderful book called The Innovator's Dilemma. When you're in a big company and you have a new idea and it might actually interfere with the existing business model of the company says, don't do that, that's a bad idea. And yet it might actually be a better idea because it would grow a bigger business, but people resist change. So one problem for innovators is to find a way to introduce their ideas in spite of the fact that there will be some resistance to change. Sometimes technology really disrupts businesses. A good example of this is the news business, which for many, many years was based on newspaper, which was the least expensive way of distributing a large amount of content to a large number of people on a regular basis. It was a great business model because people wanted to know what's new, and since they were reading it on paper, you could also put advertisements on the paper, and they would read the advertisements, and you could ask the advertiser to pay the newspaper publisher. And so the enterprise was based on advertising and subscription fees. But then advertising online changed the way that worked, because now instead of showing the same ad to everybody, you can change the advertising depending on who's looking at it. So it's a much more flexible tool. The second thing is that classified ads, which were also a source of revenue, also drifted over into the internet environment. So technology often changes business models, and you have to learn to adapt to deal with that. And I'm hoping that the news business will learn to adapt and build new business models, because good quality news reporting is absolutely essential in democratic environments. So innovation is a challenge. The second thing that's important about innovation is that it's risky. And you have to have an environment where risk is permitted. At Google, we are encouraged to take risk, and we are even encouraged to accept the possibility that we might fail. Now, what the Google leadership says is, if you're going to try something that's risky, make it really risky. Shoot for the moon. And if it doesn't work, at least you may get quite a bit farther along, but don't do something incremental, because if that fails, nobody will care, and if it works, nobody will care. So, shoot for very, very high payoff, high risk items. And we will accept, the leadership of the company, will accept the possibility that some things don't work. But it's better to have tried than not. So where does the government come in? Well, the governments are often in a position to take more risk than businesses can. A business is trying to generate profit, pay its employees, and stay alive, stay afloat. And to do that, it has to spend less money than it makes. That's an important economics 101 rule. The trouble is that when you take risk, sometimes you have to spend more money than you are making in order to take the risk. And maybe you have to do it for a longer period of time than you can afford to do. Governments, on the other hand, have the potential to accept the risk that a business is not prepared to make, or that a venture capitalist is not prepared to make, or even an angel is not prepared to make. Example, when the ARPANET project began in 1969, and it changed into the Internet project in 1973. The Defense Department funded that research and development activity from 1969 to 1990, 21 years. The National Science Foundation, which is a sister research organization, began funding its network research program in 1982, and it continued supporting that activity until 1995, at which point it shut down the NSFNet because the services were commercially available. So the point I want to make here is that the government can assume risk that companies can't, and can do so for a longer period of time. The job it has is to be thoughtful about what projects it supports, and also to be careful about pushing the technology to the point where the risk is sufficiently low that the venture capital community can take it up. So it may be that you have to go beyond just it working in the laboratory. You may have to have a working prototype that's out there functioning. So this innovation, this way of supporting innovation is in a way to take away the risk and assume it in order to allow the potential to be realized.
I want to ask one question.
Okay.
And this question is just came out because Mr. Ajar requested something from Google, and he said that we want more data centers and hosting facilities in Turkey, and especially from Google. So I want to ask this question. First of all, what do you think about it?
Did you put him up to this again? When we were meeting, every single one of his reports, his employees asked the same question. When are you going to put in more data centers? Okay. All right, so I accept the question.
I'm an independent press, by the way. Seriously, no. So the reason I'm asking is actually, we can take it to every side.
Yes.
The question is, which one is more important for a country's economy? Like more data centers, or maybe, I don't know, more data, more content, whatever?
This is a very thoughtful way of asking the question. What we should be asking for is, what is the best way to stimulate economic growth? And it's certainly true that if we installed a data center here, we would spend money to put the facilities in place, and there would be some number of employees that would run it. You'd be surprised how few employees are needed to run these data centers, because a lot of it is automated, a lot of it is managed out of our headquarters, in addition to having people locally. But that's not the best way to grow the economy. The best way to grow the economy is to establish new small and medium-sized businesses that make use of the internet, not only domestically, but also globally. And so there are two ways that this can happen. There's already investment being made in infrastructure, communications infrastructure, and I have to say that your points earlier were really very heartwarming to see the level of investment that the government is making, especially reaching to the smaller villages and towns. So the design of the internet was very carefully structured so that it didn't matter where the data centers were, as long as you could get access to them. And so its capacity, its optical fiber, its high-speed radio connectivity, that's the most important thing. For growing for growing businesses in Turkey, the best investment may not necessarily be Google putting a data center in. What if the government put a data center in? What if the government built a data center and used it to deliver products and services to the citizens of the country? What if that data center were also available for small and medium-sized businesses to begin to build up their capabilities on the network? What if they could combine access to that facility with the services that Google offers in the way of advertising? By the way, advertising is important outside the country as much as it is inside. There's more GDP outside of Turkey than there is inside. And if you're a business that wants to grow, you want access to as much of the economy as possible, both domestically and internationally. So you want to help these businesses get started and you want to help them reach markets that are all around the world, and the internet is a great way to do that, either by advertising products that are made here and can be shipped, or providing services from here to others that can be sent through the network. So software and online services are another way of growing business in the country. So my sense right now is that we should be asking, not asking, how do I get Google to put a data center in here, but what facilities and capabilities will allow my companies in Turkey to grow beyond the borders of the country? How can we create new Googles based here, but growing out?
Do you want to add something? Say
There's
something. I mean, like. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if you have translation.
Wait, here she's asking for, my interpreter is asking for the microphone. Otherwise,
Okay.
she can't interpret.
Yep. Tekrar söylersiniz çünkü şey yokmuş.
Doğru. Türkiye olarak biz yapıyoruz. Buna başladık. Özellikle TürkSat bünyesinde.
We started doing this, and we are trying to combine all the data centers of the state's institutionals, and we are about to complete one project, and there will be second and the third project in this respect. As you mentioned, we should combine on the international basis as well, not for the domestic.
Daha tercümesi devam ediyor o yüzden.
Good.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, I think we are very much aligned here.
Yeah. So I mean, like, you can talk about and discuss later on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I can ask more questions, but I want to get some questions from the audience, if you don't
Absolutely.
mind.
Let's do that. I see a
yeah.
hand up, several hands
Oh, a couple
up
of
already.
hands. I saw this gentleman first of all, so I'll start there and come back here. Oraya bir mikrofon
Microphone
verebilirsek,
is coming.
ondan sonra da buraya geleceğiz aşağı doğru. Kendinize tanıtırsanız soruyu sorarken daha güzel olur.
Okay, thank you very much for this very great speech. My name is Latif Yilmaz from Ministry of Finance, and I want to ask a question about last mentioned dimension of the internet and information technologies. And this is the point where politics and economy and democracy meet together, because we know that I am also an economist, and when we talk about factors of production, we say that labor and capital and land. But today we are talking about information, and it is the fourth great factor of production. But also it's a factor of democracy, I think, because we should talk we should talk about, for example, free movement of labor, free movement of capital. We also today talk about free movement of information, and it is the constitutive part of the democracy, and we see together, for example, from in different places of the world, different search for democracy, and which is very related to Facebook, Twitter, and internet space of the internet. So I want to ask. My question is related to the relations. Is related to this dimension of the information technologies and internet. So this new movement in information, I think, creates some problems for states. They try to control the free movement of information. They try to domesticate this space. But on the other hand, like Google or other internet companies are constituted on freedom of these technologies, freedom of information. So what is the interaction between these companies and this freedom of information, and on the other side, disciplinization or domestication of information? So, and its relation to democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is a very deep and complex question. First of all, let me say that we are very committed at Google to the idea that openness and sharing of information is the key to progress, that it is the way in which we all benefit from what each other knows. Sometimes you hear the word knowledge is power. Personally, I think it's knowledge sharing that's power. And we learned a little bit of that in the earlier wonderful talk about the notion of sharing time instead of sharing money, of granting people time as a way, as a metric, because we learn from each other, we discover each other and what we know in this internet environment. So open exchange of information is a very powerful tool. It's also the case that some information is either wrong on purpose, it's misleading, or it's mistaken, or it's like scientific information, we sometimes discover that what we thought was correct isn't, and we have to revise what we know. And so there's the possibility that information, not just in the network, but in the books we read, in the newspapers that we see, or the magazines, or the movies, or the radio programs, or television, have misinformation in them. The question is what to do about that. Esther Dyson, a good friend of mine, has a lovely way of describing it. She says that the antidote for bad information is more information, not censorship. And I think that she's correct in this view. The more we understand, the more we are able to reject information which is wrong and accept information which is correct. We also have to be prepared to accept the possibility that what we thought was correct is not anymore because a scientific discovery tells us otherwise. It's hard for some people to cope with the possibility that what they believed for a long time is wrong. But in the world of science, that's the first lesson we learn. If your experiment says your theory is wrong, don't change the experiment, you have to change the theory. So freedom of information, freedom of access to information is, in my view, an absolute key to making progress in the world. So we're committed to that at Google, and I hope that, that you and others who are sitting in this room are equally committed to this. In the case where information is bad or harmful, the smartest thing we can do is to educate people to understand why that information is no longer valid or not worthy of consideration. Sometimes we call this critical thinking, where you examine information and you decide what to accept and what to reject. I think the best tool that we can give our children is the ability to think critically about what they see and what they hear, so that they're equipped to live their lives confronted with conflicting pieces of information, and they learn how to separate the good stuff from the bad stuff. It's a good question. Thank you.
Sizden sonra da efendiye.
My name is Halil, and sorry, from Turkish Prime Ministry. I'm an expert there. I want to raise another question about a notion which is very relevant to our time, I think, which is equality and inequality, which is very discussed in your country, in our country, and all over the world, I think. When I think this notion, I think person and company relations, which is about equal access to services and everything, and or information and telecommunication. President gave examples about raising the issue of digital divide, getting services to remote areas in Turkey, which was very relevant. And another issue is public companies, public-private companies, states, and company relations. You are an innovation leader from a country, US, which is also an innovation leader. And Turkey is a developing country. So I am from public sector. I want to ask what kind of collaboration and what kind of coordination are you thinking with Turkish companies and Turkish institutions that while you are benefiting, we also benefit. We are already benefiting. Thank you for this kind of company, which is very social also. But how about transfer of technology? For example, Turkey and US are old partners. Sometimes we speak Turkey-Germany relations, Turkey-Japan, Turkey-Israel relations. We think that, for example, US transferred technology and Germany became a manufacturing leader, Japan became manufacturing leader, Israel also. Well, how about Turkey? I mean, how do you address this inequality issue relating with company?
Okay, I think
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So first of all, at least speaking for Google, we are very open about a great deal of our technology. We release our software, for example, the Chrome operating system, the Chrome browser, and the Android operating system are source code that we release to people to use however they would like to. And that's an enabling thing. That's a deep sharing of capability coming from Google. And we believe in that because we want people to take those tools and adapt them to their needs. We create infrastructure which other people can use. For example, Google Earth and Google Maps and so on have application programming interfaces on top of which people can put geographically indexed information. And in some cases, they even monetize that. They are capable of charging other users for access to this geographically indexed information, which is presented through the Google Earth or the Google Maps system. There are lots of other examples like that. So Google believes in this kind of openness. We also fund research, and at the moment it's mostly in the US, but we're starting to reach out to fund research at universities in other parts of the world. And at some point I hope we'll be able to say the same thing of research going on here in Turkey. But I want to open this discussion up beyond just the corporate interactions between Google and companies and universities here in Turkey. If we look at more broadly the opportunities for collaboration, one of the things that brought me to Ankara and to Istanbul over quite a long period of time was NATO and the Advanced Studies Institute, where we would take funds from NATO and we would spend them on building more internet infrastructure, not only in Turkey, but also in the Central Asian republics and the former Soviet Union. So my sense right now is that there is a lot of opportunity for academic exchange, for open sharing of information. I think of Google as being one of the best tools around for finding information. Think about all the books that we've managed to scan and digitize and make accessible through the network. All of that is part of a philosophy of openness. And without it, I don't see that the internet could possibly be as useful as it is today. I don't know what else you might be hoping for in terms of U.S.-Turkish relationships, and I'm not I have no authority to say anything about the U.S. government's decisions to work with Turkey, but I can tell you that my experience so far in official positions has been a pretty open exchange between companies and citizens here and in the United States, and I would certainly encourage that in the future.
Let's go one last question,
Okay.
because we're out of time.
Running out of time. I don't know where the microphone is, so.
Mikrofon acaba açık olmayabilir mi, yoksa oradan mı açmak gerekiyor? Bir kontrol edebilirsek. Yok. Yeni bir mikrofon geliyor.
There,
Hello.
the microphone
Yes.
is
Okay.
there.
Okay. I think it's fine. But I'm not so happy to ask the last question. As a government official, again, I know that some students are here as well. And since you are at the capital, okay, not only the government officials are living here. Okay,
We can
have
get a couple of more
students and
questions
others as
about.
well. Anyway, Osman Sert, I'm from the Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs. Again, thank you very much for coming here, and it's a great, pleasure for us to listen to you. Indeed, I had three questions, but one question was a bit relevant with the previous question regarding this global equality, because to a certain extent, when we are looking at these cyber technology, this intelligence and the web using, the third world countries and developing countries are generally consuming it or reprocessing, reproducing it, but they are not inventing something new. As far as we have listened some prominent figures from the Turkish companies and government institutions, they are telling that Turkey should do so much thing to innovate something new. And to what extent you see there is a hope for closing this gap, okay? And the second question about the cybersecurity, we are always leaving some traces when we are using Twitter, Google Plus, or some others. And to what should we do, or what we shouldn't do indeed when we are using internet? And no matter what, it's trustworthy. We are entrapped within such a cyber, technology, and we should go with it. Okay. A third question, I really wonder it. We know that the other side of Atlantic, there's huge cyber valleys and other Silicon Valley, something like that. But for Obamacare, the website is not running. Thanks God, in Turkey we have a very good healthcare system. But regarding what's happening over there, I'm really trying to understand what's happening with this. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not in a position to comment on the website for the affordable healthcare system because I haven't had any involvement in it. I think Google and others have been asked to offer some advice about how you build a large-scale system. I think the real problem that they had, without my knowledge of detail, is that they weren't prepared for the load that showed up instantly. This is something that Google is familiar with because the cloud-based system is intended to expand capacity as the demand shows up. And so it's a good example of how powerful cloud-based computing can be. I don't know whether the Affordable Care website was designed on top of an expandable cloud or not. If it wasn't, it probably should have been, but I don't know enough in detail to respond. On the innovation side, there are often when I have these conversations, people will say, we're very far behind. How will we ever catch up? Everyone else is ahead of us. We're still learning. And the honest answer is that you aren't really far behind at all. And let me try to explain why. The technology of the internet is changing so quickly that no matter when you start, you're in the same boat that everyone else is in, coping with the latest thing. And so when you begin working on new applications, for example, you don't have to go through all of the experimental activity that led to the current state of affairs. You start with the most recent capability. A good example of this is mobiles and applications. There's a lot of technology that makes a mobile work. But if you're building an application, you don't have to worry about this part. You only have to worry about putting the application on top of the standard interface. What that means is that you're starting where everyone else is, which is figuring out what kinds of applications can be supported by all of the underlying infrastructure that's already been put in place. So in that sense, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to act at the same level in terms of innovation and creating of new applications as anyone else does. Now, I accept the idea that you may have investments to make in infrastructure in order to allow these ideas to grow and to scale up. But that we already are hearing about some important infrastructure investments that are being made by Turkey, by the government and by the private sector. So I am actually not I am optimistic and not discouraged by the idea that innovation is in your hands and is available and can be undertaken. One thing that is very clear is that a lot of the innovation is coming out of the university and research environment. And so one question we could ask is, how well equipped are the universities in Turkey to stimulate and support research into new applications and new inventions? I'm often comforted by the following fact. The percentage of smart people in the Turkish population is exactly the same as the percentage of smart people in the American population, in the Chinese population, in the German population, and the Japanese population. Now, it happens to be true that there are more smart Chinese than there are smart Americans, because just absolute numbers. But the percentage is the same, and the degree of intelligence is the same. So you have a supply of smart, creative people, and they can be put to work here. On the cyber safety side, and the sense of loss of privacy, which I sense in your question. This is very hard because the notion of privacy is in some ways new. Some people see this as an anomaly. Let me explain. When I was about 19, I used to live in a little town in Germany called Beutelsbach. It had a population of 3,000 people. This was in 1962. No one had any telephones. You had to go to the post office to make the phone calls. The postmaster made the calls for you. He also sorted the mail. He knew who was writing to who, and he knew who was calling whom. And oh, by the way, in a little town of 3,000 people, everyone knew what everyone else was doing. So the notion of privacy, I think, actually came out of the Industrial Revolution and the growth of urban concentrations where you felt like you were anonymous. And now we're drifting back into a condition where we don't feel as anonymous as we did before because everybody has a mobile that has a camera, and they keep taking pictures, and they keep uploading them to the net where other people can see the pictures. There's nothing wrong with that except for the fact that you might be caught in a picture that somebody took. They didn't care about you. They took a picture of someone else, but you're up there on the net with them. And someone else has gone by and recognized you and put a tag on the name, and now someone else is looking for you on the net and finds you. The worst part about this is that they found you in a place where you said you didn't go. And so now we're embarrassed. So we don't have social conventions that are properly adapted to the technology that we have in front of us. So we are going to have to live through a period of time when we discover what the right social conventions are for the use of these technologies. And until we get there, it's going to feel a little bit awkward. But I think in the end, we do adopt social conventions to make us feel comfortable. I'll give you a very simple, silly example. When we're walking towards each other on the sidewalk, for example, usually we just get out of each other's way because that's more convenient. But that's a simple social convention. You can imagine a different one where you confront each other and you refuse to move until the other person gets out of the way. We don't do that, generally speaking, because it's just inconvenient. I am persuaded that we will uncover social conventions that make the online environment more comfortable than it is today. But this is the side effect of technology, and learning to adapt to that is important. I'll notice that the younger people seem to be able to adapt to this better than us older people can. And maybe that's always been true, and I can't do anything about that. So I think we stop there. But
thank you.
Thank you for having me here. I appreciate it.
Let's get one last question.
We have one more. All right.
One last, because are you a student? Okay, so you can ask a question.
We are coming from the Eskişehir. It's a close city over here. And I'm going to ask the question for me, the student side. I went the whole Europe, Chinese, Asia, and I stayed like 5 months in the Wisconsin Dells. I'm studying economics. I'm not even an economist. I'm just working on the entrepreneurship. That's why I want to ask this question.
Okay.
I already asked Tara Limi, who's the go-to entrepreneur in the USA, and she didn't answer me.
Okay.
The question is, I want to be entrepreneur, good entrepreneur. I know lots of language, and I want to learn more. I'm kind of leader. I'm president of the entrepreneurship club in my university, but there's a lot of president bigger than me, so I'm just a student. The question is, where can I start up in the Turkey or the USA? So I can move to USA right now because I'm confused that I'm just 20 and I want to do something because I'm young, I have energy, I don't have good experience, but I need the experience. The experience means bad things. So I should start up. I tried 2 times and I failed it in the Turkey. So should I do in Turkey or in the USA? I don't want to do in Europe or Asia, just USA or Turkey.
So
can you answer that?
Yeah.
So now if you say US,
Yeah.
it means that he's going to fail there because he wants to fail first of all.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, I don't know enough about the Turkish environment to know what happens when you fail at a business startup, but I will tell you that in other parts of the world, failure is actually quite damaging. In Europe, for example, a business failure is very harmful to your reputation.
Exactly.
In the Silicon Valley, failure is a mark of experience, unless you fail all the time, and that's a different problem. But if you fail once or twice in a business in the Silicon Valley, we recognize that it's risky. We recognize that not every business survives. Any venture capitalist will tell you that 80 to 90% of the venture capital investments fail. And they accept that level of risk in the hope that the 10% of them will be very successful. They'll be the next Google or Twitter or Facebook or something. So it's important that failure is not considered to be a personal failure. It may very well be because business conditions were changing. Maybe the business model was not well worked out. There were a lot of companies during the dot boom period from 1995 to 2000 that actually didn't have a business model at all. They just said, we're doing something with internet, and the venture capital people were throwing money at them, and eventually they ran out of capital. And they couldn't figure out what happened because they didn't understand the difference between revenue and capital. Revenue keeps coming and capital runs out. This is, economics 101. So you want to be in a place where a business failure is accepted as a possibility. If I were in your shoes, I would be asking myself, what happens in Turkey if I have a business failure, and do I still have a reputation? Can I retain a reputation as an innovator and a creator? I think maybe this is an important point to be made, not only about culture, but also about the, say, the political environment. If you do not embrace the possibility of failure in the face of risk-taking, it will be very hard to create an environment where small and medium-sized businesses will be created and will grow. In order to grow a small and medium-sized business, you have to take risk. And you have to have other people take risk too. You have to borrow money from them in order to make the business bigger. Everyone has to share in that risk, and everyone has to accept that it's okay that sometimes it won't work. If you can't see a way of achieving that attitude in Turkey, then maybe you have to come to the US. But I would honestly prefer that you find a way, by pointing out what you just pointed out, to change the attitudes in Turkey, if they need to be changed, so that more businesses can be started and grow right here. Because that's where the wealth will be created, is among the population of owners and creators of businesses. That should happen here in Turkey, not someplace else.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Vint Cerf, ladies and gentlemen, one of the fathers of the internet.
Thank
It
you
was
very
a
much.
great
I
pleasure for
appreciate
the speak to you.